to the heartbeat of America. Listen to the heartbeat of America. Yeah, it's the season in the air, the color of open space. Mountain lake, magic place, feel the heartbeat of America.
When your heart beats for the great outdoors, see your Chevy dealer, where you'll find over 90 different ways to enjoy it all.
On the heartbeat of America, Chevrolet. That's today's Chevy truck.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Workshop, brought to you by the Heartbeat of America, today's Chevy truck.
Gosh, it feels good to be out here today. It's just wonderful to get out here and smell the wonderful smells and walk along this river and enjoy the scenery, the real wild part of the West that still exists. And many of our rivers are still like this. There's nothing more exciting than to come over that rise and look down on the river and see rising trout and know that they're feeding down there, and then wade into the water and present the right fly in the right way and take that fish. Many times you're going to be defeated, but once in a while you win, and when you do, that victory is so sweet. I think that the first thing we ought to do and place to start would be to talk a little bit about the equipment that you're going to need if what you want to do is to get into the wonderful world of fly fishing. 10 years ago, if you only had one rod, it would probably be a glass rod, and what you'd want maybe be an 8.5 foot rod for a 6-weight line. With the advent of graphite, which we use a lot today, it's such a powerful casting tool and is so versatile that maybe if you only owned one rod, it would be a 9-foot rod that cast a 5-weight line. We might say a little something about an explanation about what we mean when we say a 5-weight line. What they're talking about is that this particular rod, which is a 9-foot rod for a 5-weight line, works most effectively with a certain weight of line casting out in front of it. And what they're talking about is the first 30 feet of line, usually not to include any taper on it, would be the right amount of weight to make this rod work at its optimum. That means that if you're casting further distances than 30 or 40 feet, then maybe you want a slightly lighter line. If you are consistently casting short lines, as we very often do in the Rocky Mountains fishing nymphs, may well be that a 5-weight rod is going to work best with a 6-weight line. So if you know a little something about what that means, a 5-weight line, it tells you something a little bit about what kind of equipment you might want. If you only had one line for this rod, and many of the reels have interchangeable spools, so you can buy one reel and buy extra spools for other lines. If you only had one line, you would probably want a floating line, and as often as not it would be called a double taper, meaning that from the middle to the end it is identical on both ends. There's a couple of advantages to that. Number one, it casts effectively. The purpose of a tapered line is to allow your cast to be efficient, because as the cast starts to lose energy, the larger part of the line is turning over a smaller part of the line. This allows you also to throw a fairly delicate cast to a fish. If you're consistently casting further distances, you might want what they call a weight forward line. And the only advantage of a weight forward over a double taper is the fact that it allows you to cast a little bit further because there's more weight up in front of the line. Wading equipment has become very sophisticated anymore. You have many choices as far as what your wading equipment is going to do for you and what it's going to be. You have a choice of stocking foot waders like these are, made out of neoprene, or you can have the same material made into hip waders. You can have boot-footed waders, which have obviously the boot attached to the wader itself. And with these stocking foot waders, what you have is a wading boot, which is separate. Whatever wading equipment you have, it is mandatory that you have felt soles on your boots. These just make for some wading safety. The old lugs that are on some of the old hip boots. Best thing you can do with those is to grind a little of those lugs off and get some indoor-outdoor carpet and with a good waterproof glue. Glue that onto the bottom of those wading boots, and you're going to find that you're going to have a lot more success staying on your feet out on the stream. For particularly difficult wading, you might want some special adaptations, and one of them might be wading grids. And these are no more than wading boots or just a slip-over rubber overshoe, which will fit over your wading boot, or even it'll fit over the top of your boot-footed waders, which have aluminum grids on the soles. If you're going to be doing deep wading where there's particularly slippery conditions, these are something that are liable to save your life, literally, so they become something that's a fairly important part of the equipment if you're going to be fishing big water that might be fairly dangerous wading. Let's talk about what is probably a fly fisher's single most important piece of equipment, and that's a good pair of glasses, preferably polarized glasses. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, casting a fly, you basically have a piece of steel out on the end of a line which is whipping through the air, and the chances of eventually hooking some part of your anatomy is at least decently high. The chances are excellent that if you did not wear glasses, that sometime in your fishing career you're going to damage an eye. So like I say, it would be fairly foolish to think about fishing without some form of glasses. Fly fishing is an extremely visual sport, and therefore it's important that you be able to see as much as possible on the water. I know some very experienced fly fishermen that feel that they'd rather forget their rod at home than forget their polarized glasses. So it's important that you have a good pair of glasses, and it's important that you be willing to invest in at least decent equipment as far as your glasses are concerned. A lot more innovations coming into fly fishing. One, of course, is the ubiquitous vest, or for some of us that are getting lazier as we get older, you can use a bag. The Bucks bag, as an example, is something that I have come to use almost exclusively. And it has several pockets. It fits over your side, almost like a fishing creel did in the old days when you like to kill all your fish. This is what we carry nowadays because, again, it's light, it's portable, it's comfortable to wear, gives you a flat surface to work on if you want to do something out in the middle of the stream and not drop everything into the water. And along with that, I carry all the stuff that I used to carry in my vest in a ditty bag, which is full to the top with all of the things that I feel I might use. Before I set out for fishing in the morning, basically what I'll do is pick out the gear and the fly boxes, the reels that I think I'm going to need for the day. I put them in my Bucks bag and I'm ready to go. Either one are going to do just fine. Something else that you'll probably want to supply yourself with is a variety of fly boxes. There seems to be no end to the types, too many to even mention. There's nothing a fly fisher likes better than to fill his boxes full of brightly colored flies, each one sure to catch a fish somewhere, sometime, each one treasured. I like to carry quite a few kinds of boxes. I carry boxes that basically are clip-ins that hold my nymphs. In this particular case, this is a box of black stoneflies that early in the year are particularly prevalent in this particular area. I have one box that has nothing but caddisflies in it, adult caddisflies. Carry another one that basically are deer hair patterns. These are western patterns by and large, tend to be large and colorful. Humpies, grasshoppers, muddler minnows, all sorts of flies that you're going to need on the stream. And we might get even bigger so that we finally get into the streamers, some of the bitch cricks, rubber-legged flies that are going to do the job for us. Let's talk a little bit about wading, proper wading, and wading safety. Something that is really important for you to be able to enjoy this sport. Most injuries that occur on the stream occur not when you're wading deep, but when you're wading shallow. And yet look at these rocks all around me and think about the possibility of my stumbling on a rock and either hitting my head or some other important part of my anatomy on one of these stones. And that is as like as not what is happening as far as injuries on the stream. There is very little water here to cushion you if you do fall. So it doesn't have to be rocks that are out of the water. It can be rocks that are sitting right under the surface, and there's several around me. If the water tends to be fairly deep where you're wading, or tends to be fairly treacherous, Something else that you might carry if you choose to is a wading staff. This one is a fold-up variety. They're made out of wood, or they can be made out of aluminum tubing, which this is. And it's on a holster, so I can pull it out of that holster. It's got a bungee cord up the middle of the staff itself, and without moving my position, I can put it together with one hand, and that's going to be my third leg if I get into some trouble. When I'm wading, I'm usually not as concerned with how heavy the water is where I'm wading as what's downstream from me in case I should fall in. So again, I don't mind wading into fairly heavy water if that's the case. This, of course, is not. But if I'm in knee-deep water, which is not very deep, and downstream from me is some terrible rapids, I'm a lot more concerned about that than wading in the rapids if what's downstream from me is a nice, easy pool where I know I can get out fairly safely. Something else that you want if you're going to be wading is a wader belt. This one comes built into my bag, but what that belt does is if I fall down, it helps keep the water from coming in the top of these waders. What you want to do is if you fall in deep water is to just bend your knees like if you're sitting down on a chaise lounge or something. What you're going to do is trap air. Even if water comes in your waders, you're going to trap air below your knee. The other thing that you want to do is, if you can, get your feet downstream so that the current doesn't ram you into a rock or something. And then what's going to happen is you're just going to float along until you find a place where you can safely and easily get out of the water. Well, now that we're armed for the stream, why don't we go down and see what Chris is up to?
Eric, you know, that storm last week, I think, really changed the pattern of the fishing for these fish, their feeding patterns. And it's got a little color to it now, and it's a little higher. And I don't think they're feeding too much today. They might later on.
Yeah, well, it really doesn't look like it. We've had a little hatch come off sporadically, but I haven't seen any fish up to it. And, you know, you caught that one nice rainbow this morning on that woolly booger, and I'm not too sure that might not be a fly to think about. Why don't we go ahead and tie a couple? I didn't bring any with me, and I did bring some fly tying paraphernalia, so maybe we can whip out a couple of flies that are going to do the job for us. Well, we each got a fly now, Chris. You're betting that woolly booger's going to work, and that's looking pretty good. And I'm thinking maybe if I can get on the bottom with this hare's ear, that I might be able to do something. So we've got a couple of new flies and something else to work with. Let's get out there and give it a shot.
Let's go get them.
Great. Generally speaking, your fly rod has two functions. One, obviously, is to cast, and one is to fight the fish once you catch one, if you do catch one. In casting, I think that it's not as important to have a lot of different kinds of casts as it is to develop one cast and develop it well to the point where you can use it and that you have great accuracy with it. How many fish you catch is going to have a lot more to do with how well you can control a short cast than it has anything to do with how long a cast you can make. So when you start out, a good idea is to just take a comfortable amount of line and begin to practice with it. Something that with one hand you can easily lift, and without using your offhand at all, that you can lift the line and lay it out. Now the stroke is a very short stroke. We're going to think about what the rod is doing. The rod is the same as a bow and the line is an arrow. So what's going to happen is that the rod will begin to flex, and as you throw the line back and then forward, it's the flexure of the rod that actually is keeping the line moving. Ideally, we do not make an arc with the top of the line, with the tip of the line, or tip of the rod. What we want to do is keep it fairly level And what you want to do is to throw the line out over the water so that it then curls over the water and then lays down on top of the water. So you don't cast to the water, you cast over the top of the water. The stroke is a short stroke that stops about 1 o'clock on a clock face, and when it comes forward it stops at about 2 o'clock. Now if you look at a person casting, it looks like the stroke is going further than that, but what's happening is that on the forward stroke especially, you're laying the rod down, so it looks like you end up flat. You don't end up flat. You actually let the line go at about 2 o'clock. So to me, what it feels like, it's one thing what it looks like. The stroke goes to 1 o'clock, and you stop and pause for the line, then back to 2 o'clock, and you let the line go. But in essence, what it feels like to me is that I'm trying to stop the rod straight up behind me, and that I'm coming forward to about 2 o'clock, letting the line go out over the water. Ideally, the line will not lay on the water with the belly first and then the tip last. What'll happen is that it totally uncurls and then settles on the water all at the same time pretty much. I've heard casting instructors say that you can feel the line tugging back when it totally uncurls. And that's what you want to wait for. You want the line to totally uncurl behind you, and then you want to start forward so that you get the full weight of the line on the rod tip. Again, the more line that you're throwing, the longer you have to wait in back for it to uncurl. A short cast, there's almost no pause. If we take and make a fairly long cast with a lot of line, you bring the rod back, you stop, you wait, then you come forward. Take the rod back, you wait, then you come forward. Line speed has a lot to do with how accurately you can cast, and what generates line speed again is the movement of the rod. You go back, you stop, you wait, and it's a power stroke forward, and you wait. Back, forward. The only way to really develop a decent cast is to practice. To be really effective at casting, again, your accuracy is just about everything. Another cast that you're going to need to develop is one that gives you some distance, and it's called the double haul. And what the double haul does is increase line speed, and the way you do it is with the hand away from the rod, your off-rod hand. And let's get a little line in so maybe we can see a little bit better what we're doing. Now we're using a very light rod. This is not meant to cast a lot of line, but the double haul can work here too. Pull, let go, pull. Now as you pull on the backstroke and we pull down, you exaggerate the flexure of the rod. You make it bend even more than it would just with the weight of the line. And that increases the line speed, and that allows you to throw more line. So if we take line out in coils and we use that double haul, once we let the line go, we can see the line fly out from my fingers. And even with a very, very light rod like this, you can lay quite a bit of line out if that's necessary. By the way, make sure that you use a proper grip, and the proper grip is to have your thumb on the top of your cork. That's the most powerful of your digits, and so that's the proper way to hold your rod. Pretty much where you point your thumb then is where the line is going to go, and you can almost use it as a gauge. That's your target. You pick a target out there, and as you let that line go, just point that thumb at it, and it's going to go right out there where you want it to go. Suppose that you're up against some bushes and that you don't have a back cast. You can't get that line out behind you. Another cast you can use is called the roll cast. And basically the way it's executed is to lift the rod slowly until the line passes your ear. And as it does, you snap the rod forward, and it'll throw out a roll of line. And you can cast surprisingly quite a bit of line with that sort of a cast. Come behind your ear with the line. The line has to start to pass you, and then you snap it forward and you throw a roll in the line, and it'll flip your fly over. Again, you come up past your ear and you flip the rod downstream. And the power stroke is a very acute and sharp movement of the rod. It's not a slow movement. You're not throwing a slow big roll in the line. That can work, but it won't flip it over. It's a very sharp forward movement. Past your head, downstream. Cross stream, upstream. It'll work in just about any direction you want to take it. There's only a very few knots that you really need to know to begin fly fishing, or to start fly fishing, or improve your fly fishing. One of them is going to be a clinch knot that we're going to tie. Now, for demonstration purposes, we're going to use a hook that I would tie a fly on to fish for tarpon in the salt. And we're going to use a fluorescent fly line because that's going to give us pretty good visibility so that you can see what it is we're doing. So the first knot we're going to tie is a clinch knot, which is used to attach the fly to the leader. You take your tippet end and you slide it through the top of the eye of the hook. Don't cheat yourself on the tag end. So now we have a tag end which is loose, and we have the standing end of the fly. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap the standing end, or the tag end, 5 times around the standing part of the line. Once we've done that, what we've done is just roll the line together. Then we'll take the tip end and we're going to slide that right through the loop that's formed by the leader at the eye of the hook. We'll run that through there. You hold the tag end and the standing end, and you pull those together until they begin to tighten down, and then you can tighten them right onto the line. You can use your fingers to jam that knot closed. And that's a clinch knot. An excellent knot for attaching 2 pieces of monofilament together is called the improved surgeon's knot. Move the 2 ends of the monofilament together so that they're tracked right along each other. Make a simple overhand knot. Take your line, both ends through. A second overhand knot. Take both ends through the loop. And then just pull slowly together and you have your knot. And that is an excellent knot and very easy to tie. Well, let's give this fly that I just tied a chance, see what it can do for us. Now I'm going to use that clinch knot to set that fly on there. Probably a lot of good fly fishermen are going to turn over in their grave. I'm going to wet that monofilament so that we don't weaken that knot. And let's see if we can catch a fish with this fly. I have a feeling those fish are going to be working on the bottom, and if they are, like I say, maybe that gold-ribbed hare's ear that we just tied up is going to do the trick for us. Okay, let's go out and give this fly a try. Now this is perfect water. To use a little technique that is in essence probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest form of fly fishing, which is downstream wet fly fishing. We've got a nice even current and a nice full riffle here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work out a little bit of line. And we're going to just cast quartering downstream. And then we're going to just mend the line upstream to just let that fly slowly float where we want it to go. And you can mend upstream to make that fly float slower against the current, or you can mend downstream. And we'll just let that line just curl right out below us. We'll just let it curl till it just finally stops of its own volition. Okay, what we're going to want to do now is to mend upstream, and we do it by just picking up the line and just flicking it upstream lightly. It's not a real hard action. All you're doing is let's do that again. We're going to just take the line and we're going to flick it upstream. Sometimes it may be that you want to mend downstream, but you can control your drift by doing that. And that's one of the advantages of a fairly long fly rod, is it gives you lots of line control. So I can put that line out there, I can pick it up and move it, I can let that float out. If I want to, I can mend downstream. If I want more speed for some reason, if you're fishing with a streamer, you might want to speed up your fly. So you can use that mend quite a bit, and it's good to learn how to do that. It's very, very simple, and it's no more than a flick of the wrist. And remember that your fly line is going to do whatever the tip of the rod does. So if I flick the tip of the rod, the line's going to go with it. If I flick it the other way, the line's going to go the other way. We're just going to let that fly float out in that current. Just let it curl out below us. Now we have a little weight in that fly, so we know it's going to sink. This is not a real deep riffle, but we're going to use maybe enough weight to get it down if we need to. We might, if it's real deep, we might add some weight. I like to start with very little weight, just whatever I've put in the fly. And what it's going to do, it's going to sink as it floats, and then as it comes taut on the line, it's going to start to rise in the water. And that's often when the fish will take those. They'll take them for an active nymph that maybe is hatching, or a caddis that is coming to the top of the water to hatch. Little mend upstream, just going to follow our float. Let it float right out. There he is. Now, one of the things you want to do when you pick up a fish like this is going to help a lot. A lot of reels come with that handle on the right-hand side, but you don't want to do that. You want to have that handle on the left-hand side because you want to work that rod with your right hand. You want to be able to move that rod with that fish so that you can move around any obstacle so that you can get that fish right back on the reel. The other thing is that a lot of people like to land their fish pulling in the line and letting it sag below them like this. That is a real bad habit to develop because sooner or later you're going to get a big fish and you're going to lose him because you didn't get him on the reel. So the very first thing you want to do is get that fish right onto the reel. Play him off the reel. If that fish starts to run, I'm going to turn loose and just let the rod and the reel handle the fish. As soon as he stops, then I'm going to start to fight him. Now, one way to play a fish, the only way to play a fish, is that you use the tip when you don't want to put any pressure on the fish. By holding a high rod, the tip does not put very much pressure on the fish. When that fish stops and I start to work him, I'm going to want to drop the rod down and start pulling him sideways or off balance with the butt of the rod. So the strength in fighting the fish is in the butt. The delicacy is in the tip. Now again, that fish is wanting to run. We'll let him pull off the tip. He's stopped running now, and I'm going to start bringing him in, and I'm going to drop that rod down so I can get some pressure on him. And again, we want to play him if we can with our right hand. Looks like a rainbow. And we're going to try to just keep him off balance and just play him in close. Nice fish. Nice healthy fish. Almost for sure this fish has some cutthroat in him the way he looks. In fact, he looks like he has a lot of cutthroat in him. But boy, what beautiful color this fish has. He's mostly cutthroat. From the look of him, you can see the orange slashes under his throat. He's got nice ivory tips. Wet your hand just a little bit before we release this fish so that you don't damage him. And if you handle him gently, very often they'll let you pick him up just nicely. Look at the ivory. Look at the ivory on his fins, on the tips of his fins. It's a nice thick fish. That's a classic trout. Absolutely a classic trout. Now that's the fly that we just tied a little while ago, and it's a hare's ear, and really it's a fairly generic nymph is what it really is. Now we've taken that fly out. That fish is ready to be released. When you release him, hold him in the water gently. Don't just throw him back. Give him a chance to revive just a little bit. Hold him facing the current. Let him just swim right out of your hand when the time comes. What a wonderful work of nature this fish is. They are just beautiful. There he goes. You know, one of the beautiful things about releasing a fish like that is that he's going to only be a little bit bigger next year if he's here. If not, maybe he'll leave some of his children in the stream for us. And I love to think that maybe sometime my daddy caught that fish's daddy or mama, and maybe someday my grandson's going to catch the progeny of that particular fish. And that's one of the things we need to think about. You know, it's been said at some time that we don't inherit all of this beautiful outdoors from our grandfathers. We've borrowed it from our grandchildren. So let's be a little careful of this out of doors, because gosh, it's a beautiful heritage we have. God, Chris, that little puff of wind came up and caught that fly and put it right in my arm, and that sucker's in over the barb.
You did it, huh? Did it hit a nerve?
No, but this is definitely the biggest catch of the day. I've just been bragging about how sharp these hooks are, and I mean, that sucker, I didn't even feel it go in. I don't feel it now. But this is certainly going to be a golden opportunity to show people how to take flies out of various parts of their anatomy, and there certainly is an easy way to do it, and it doesn't involve any of this pushing the hook through, which is barbarian, but there's a very simple way to remove them.
I learned that too, and I've just learned this new way, and I think it, let's put it this way, I hope it works.
Now, I'd suggest that you not try this technique if you've got it in an eyelid or something like that, but
First thing we got to do is get this leader off, this tippet. Clip that off.
be careful. I caught a fish on that fly.
You might want to save that tippet. And then we'll take some bigger leader material, and I'll slip it over the head of the fly. Then I'm going to put my thumb down on the fly and push it. What that does is push the barb down really underneath the flesh that it's hooked into. And then I'm going to jerk hard with this other line. And hopefully this won't cause too much pain, Eric.
Well, I've had 5 or 6 taken out of me that way. It's gone.
It's gone. So's the
You
fly.
can see, you know, there's not even, well, there's one little drop of blood there. But that's a good way to remove those, and they'll come clean. I've had them as big as number 4s removed out of my arm. Got one in my face one time, and you don't even feel it come out. You know, the nice
did it
thing
hurt?
about that, not a bit. You don't feel a thing.
That'll be $100, please.
Like I say, just,
That's pretty slick.
but you lost my fly.
I did lose your fly.
What are you
So,
laughing about? I
You
caught
only
a
owe
fish
me
with that.
$50.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Let's talk just a little bit now about, before we go back out onto the river, about leaders, that vital link between you and hopefully the fish that you're hoping to catch. They come in a blizzard of makes and kinds, and it's really sometimes confusing, but really basically all you need to remember about leaders is that they're tapered, just as the fly line is tapered, to allow you a little bit extra ease of casting. And normally speaking, the size tippet, which is the end, the smallest part of the leader, is gauged to the size fly that you're going to be using. There's 3 parts to your leader. There's the butt section, which attaches to the fly line. There's the intermediate section, which is usually a smaller diameter. And then there's what we call the tippet. And the tippet is the very finest part of the leader. What makes a leader strong is partly its stretch. And so sometimes after you've played a heavy fish and stretched out your leader, you might want to put a new tippet on to make sure that you're ready to go for that next big bruiser. If the water is fairly clear and fairly shallow, you might want to use a fairly long leader, maybe as long as 12 or even 16 feet. But for most of our fishing in this area, a 9-foot leader is quite adequate, and it allows you to do just about anything you want to do. Well, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that our leader is perfectly straight. There's a couple of kinds of nymphing we can do, and one is really just a classic, what they call short line technique, and it's just exactly what it says it is. You use a fairly short line, and it works most effectively in pocket water, where there's a lot of broken water and you can get pretty close to the fish because of all of the turbulence and noise. So you don't have to worry so much about waiting quietly. And you don't have to worry a lot about the fish seeing you, because like I say, there's so much turbulence in these areas that this makes good short line nymphing technique. I like to use just my fly line as my strike indicator. And I will use a little mucilin or another kind of floatant, maybe some blip or something, just to keep that fly line floating high, and I'll just put it on my first 8 or 10 inches of fly line and about 8 or 10 inches of the butt. That will make this bright fly line float very high, and so that's one strike indicator. Sometimes, though I don't use them very often, sometimes under certain lighting conditions you can have a real problem with the light, and there are a variety of little strike indicators that you can use on the market. I think one of the disadvantages of these strike indicators is that they have a tendency to float the line and the leader, and you have to be mighty careful that they're letting the fly get to the bottom. And since I don't like to be moving them around and messing with them, like I say, I use them only when I have really bad lighting conditions. Other than that, I like to just use my fly line, and that's 95% of the time. Okay, let's see if we can get a fish out of here, and we'll explain what we're doing. Now we're going to use a short line technique. We're going to throw that fly right up into that pocket, and we're going to just follow it out. Now I can see the tip of my line very clearly on the water, and the trick here is that you should strike at any pause of that fly line. Anything that fly line does that doesn't look right to you as far as how it's floating, no matter how subtle it might be, you want to react to it. The fish, most of the time, if they're not working on the surface, the fish are going to be on the bottom, and you've got to get your nymph on the bottom. Whatever it takes. If you have to add a little bit of weight to your leader above maybe a foot or 18 inches above the fly to get that fly down on the bottom, then you have to do that. Very often those fish are not going to come up to that fly if it's floating in the middle water. The vision of a trout as he sees through the surface of the water to the outside of the water is in the shape of a cone. And the nearer to the surface that fish is, the smaller the cone is, the deeper the fish is, the wider the cone is. This will help you understand a lot about how a fish sees outside the water. If you're not losing a few flies once in a while, you're just not nymph fishing right, because you do have to get on the bottom, because that's where the fish are going to be almost for sure. The whole name of the game in nymph fishing is line control. Now the wind is blowing right now, so it's making me have to keep a fairly low rod so that the wind isn't moving my line around. But normally speaking, I like to fish on a short line nymph technique. I like to maintain a fairly high rod and just keep as much fly line on the water as I absolutely need to, because it makes me very sensitive to anything that's happening with that fly. The other thing is that the fly line, if that's my indicator, has to be downstream of the leader and the fly. And the more direct line I have to that fly, the better. Now you don't want to drag the fly. You want it to just drift naturally through the water, but it's kind of a fine line that you're treading there, because you also want to be in a position to strike as quickly as possible. If you watch a guppy in a little fish tank, or if you have fish at home in an aquarium, you put food in there and some of that stuff isn't something they want to eat, they'll pick it up and they'll almost immediately blow it out again. And that's exactly what the trout does. It picks that fly up thinking it's food, but almost immediately it just puffs it out. And so some of the strikes can be very, very, very subtle, and you have to be ready to react to just about anything. The best way to learn is that you must react to anything that you think might be a strike, no matter how subtle. Okay, we're going to move downstream, because the way this pocket lines up over here, I think I can fish it better from the other side of the river. And one thing, don't be too lazy to move to get into the right position to fish a spot just the way you want to. So if that means moving around and getting on the other side of the river to really be able to do the job, and you're able to do that, go ahead and do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to try up into that riffle and see what we can do up there, because that looks like a pretty good spot. And again, we're going to just watch that drift. Going to watch that drift. We're getting a nice drift right through there. That could be a good spot. And right up behind that rock, let that drift down through there. We got a little pause there. Now, as fast as we can, we want to get that fish onto the reel, if at all possible. And again, we want to play him, if we can, with our our right hand, looks like a rainbow. Nice fish. Nice fish, not a big fish, but. And we're going to try to just keep him off balance and just play him in close. When you're fighting a fish, if you keep that tip up, you put the least pressure on him. And again, if I want to put a lot of pressure on him, I'll drop that tip toward the fish, and then I can move him. And since he swims side to side, you can throw him off balance the best side to side. Okay. Now you're most likely to lose the fish just about the time that you land him. So we're going to just move him up nice and easy. Nice rainbow. Boy, I love these fish that were born in this river. Their fins are all nice and clean, and there's no rub spots on them. These are just beautiful fish. We'll just hold him there till he feels he's ready to go. We have a couple of kinds of trout food here. We have a stonefly nymph. We also have a dragonfly larva. They're quite a large insect, as you can see. And as an aquatic insect, this is a real steak dinner for a trout. Now, generally speaking, trout foods break into about 4 categories, which are the stoneflies, the caddisflies, the mayflies, and then terrestrials as far as just large group. And terrestrials would be ants, grasshoppers, anything that normally doesn't live in the river but has a tendency to fall in the river and become trout prey. These, however, like I say, can be flies that you might want to look at. We'll give you some idea of how to imitate. If you've not fished a river before, your best bet is to either seine up a few nymphs to see what maybe the predominant trout food in the area is, or what you might do even better is to talk to a local fly shop owner or local fisherman to get some idea of what patterns work in a stream. Once you've fished a stream for a while, you have a pretty good idea of what's going to be happening at any given time and what sorts of insects day in, day out the trout might be looking for.
Prior to owning the Chevrolet, I had a Ford. Well, I switched to the Chevy because I like the looks better than the Ford. I found out that they had completely redid the truck. You need a 4-wheel drive truck. You don't want to have to get out and lock your wheels in. If you want to go into 4-wheel drive, you can just shift into it. This Chevrolet truck is the best vehicle I have ever owned.
Heartbeat of America, that's today's Chevy truck.
If you don't believe it, just go out and try it yourself.
Eric, it's unfortunate, but I'm going to have to leave. It's about that time. I've got to get back, and I just wanted to thank you for inviting me up here and fishing on the ginger quill today. I really enjoyed your companionship.
Well, Chris, it was a lot of fun. We caught a few fish. I wish it could have been a little better. Often it is, but that's fishing.
Well, maybe later on, before the snow flies, we'll get a chance to do it again.
Well, I'd love to have you come up. Like I said, we have some just great fishing. The water's come up, and it's put our dry fly fishing off, but we'll get a few, and it looks like that riffle you're heading for upstream ought to produce a few fish.
Yeah, I don't think I can resist that. That looks too good. So
Well,
I'll give that a shot on the way out, and I'll try this fly you just tied for me.
Great.
Thank you, Eric.
You bet. We'll
Take
see you
care.
again, and like I say, drive safely going back.
All right. Take care.
This is pretty classic Platte River water. We have a nice little pool above, a little riffle breaks into. Basically, you have 2 kinds of habitat here. That far, smoother, slower water is going to be classic brown trout habitat. They like that kind of water a little bit better. The rainbows like more oxygenation. They like a little bit more break to the water, a little more current, and so they're going to tend to lay right out in this particular area here. Now, if you look at water, basically the things you have to remember are the trout are going to be interested in 3 things. They're going to be interested in having water that gives them some protection, and that can either be because they're under an obstruction, or it can be that they have depth of water. Or if you look out right in this riffle, you can see how broken the water is. It's going to be difficult for them to be seen from above. And remember that other than other fish, their main predators are birds of prey. And in these canyons like this, they're very acutely aware of things over them, and they feel very vulnerable if they're out in the open. The other thing that they're going to need is going to be food, and so they want to be in a position where they can lay in the current and be able to pick up food as it comes gliding down to them. Last but not least, the name of the game for a fish in a river is expenditure of energy. So they're not going to move too far to pick up a piece of food that doesn't compensate them for the energy lost in the activity. By the same token, they can't afford to lay out in the heaviest currents where they're working hard all the time. As it is, they have to work a little bit to maintain their position, but they're going to try to find some place that really affords them all of those things. Protection from being preyed upon, protection from the current itself so that it makes their ability to live in this environment just a little bit easier, and food. And so if you think in terms of those three things, you'll start to understand why it is that this whole area won't have fish, but that certain areas in this pool will have fish. We would most expect that the fish, unless they're feeding very, very actively and we see them working and rising down below us, are probably going to be pretty much in this riffled, broken area. There's nice rock formations here. There's enough depth to give the fish some protection and make them feel safe. And so this is an area where we would expect that they would be hanging out most of the time. Right above this is some really very flat water. And about the only time that that's really productive fishing is going to be if we actually get a good hatch start and fish reveal themselves. That's awful difficult water to just fish blind. If you actually can see some fish, you're in good shape. But the one thing we can see is that right along the cliff is the deepest part of the river. And to add a little interest over there, we've got a big tree kind of overhanging the river so we get some nice shadow. We got a couple of cliffs. That's a good place for a big brown trout to hang. I think we ought to give that a try. That's a little too tempting to me to pass up. Well, fishing is good here on the North Platte River. It's not that way everywhere. It's only through proper management and conservation we can be assured of maintaining this delicate balance that gives us plenty of fish. I'm reminded of a conversation that I had a few weeks ago with my friend Will Downs, who's had 60-odd years of fly fishing experience, about his early days of fishing back in the streams of the eastern United States.
We were the only dry fly fishermen in the region, and they had planted brown trout about 20 years before. The little streams and the big streams all around our village were just loaded with big brown trout. We set our own limits of 16 inches to anything under 16 inches was returned. This was when we were 12 and 14 years old.
Well, what were the limits then?
6 for all trout.
Yeah.
And bag limit when we first started was 75.
75 fish was the bag limit?
Yeah. And within a couple of years it changed to 25 because people couldn't catch 75 anymore. And we lived with 25 for a couple of years, and then when I went off to college, they had lowered the limit to 10. And then when I got back out of the Army a few years after that, they had lowered the limit to 4 for most of the Adirondack rivers. This inexorable progress, increasing number of fishermen, roads getting you places. The streams were overwhelmed, and they were cleaned out. But that has all changed. The fish went, and gradually the idea began to come through that if there was going to be this fishing pressure pouring into the Adirondacks, there would be no fishing at all. And that's when they began successively to lower the limits. And that's when the ethic of catch and release, while there and in other places, began to appear.
What is it about fishing that fascinates you?
Well, one may even expand that and say, what is it about fly fishing that is so fascinating? The challenge of seeing a fish rising, and the way it's rising, or what you see, you may see a fin or a tail, you estimate that that's a big fish. Well, from that moment, you're big game hunting. in the trickiest thing, big game hunting is easy as compared with getting that big, wise old trout to get your fly. And you begin to learn a river like this one here intimately, and that becomes more fun still. Because even when a fish isn't rising, you say, well, you know, day before yesterday I got a great big one there, and I put him back, and I'm going to see if I can catch him again.
Hi, my name is Jay Warburton, and I would like to invite you to enjoy other titles in the Sportsman's Workshop Video Library series. Babe Winkleman covers it all in how to catch walleyes, crankbaits, spinners, jigs, soft plastic lures, and live bait techniques. This video will assure you more consistent success in your fishing for walleye. The country's foremost big game guide, Dick Ray, takes professional outdoorsman Roger Moore on the hunt of a lifetime. These tips presented in How to Hunt the Majestic Elk will let you join the 20% of the hunters who take 80% of the trophies. In Decoys and Duck Calls, best-selling author Bob Brister will show you the secrets of using decoys and duck calls, adapting to weather and temperature conditions, proper gun selection, shell and shot size selection, and dozens of other secrets for duck hunting success. In How to Hunt Black Bears, you will join Roger Moore and Dick Ray as they seek out their trophy in the golden-covered slopes of the New Mexico Rockies during early fall. Using horses and hounds, you will learn Dick Ray's secrets for success as they bag a big boar. In Kids Plus Fishing Equals Fun, your family will learn all the basics as pros Roger Moore and Gary Klein take over 25 youngsters through the basics of casting, tying knots, rigging and baiting the hook and line, selecting and use of lures, and much, much more. Under the narrative expertise of Kurt Gowdy, you will enjoy the finest wildlife photography ever put on film. How to Hunt North American Big Game takes you into the homelands of grizzly bears, Alaskan moose, mountain lions, Dall sheep, mule deer, white-tailed deer, elk, and many other big game animals. In How to Hunt Wild Turkeys, author and wildlife biologist J. Wayne Fears will introduce you to secrets to guarantee your hunting success. He'll show you the best turkey calls and how and when to use them, how to hunt in different kinds of turkey habitat, shotgun choice, and other necessary equipment you'll need. In Secrets for Catching Walleye, Babe Winkleman takes you even further into his secret world for consistently catching walleyes, covering new ways to rig live baits, work spinners, crankbaits, and soft plastic lures. In Introduction to Muzzleloading, Dick Gassaway takes you through the basics of black powder, including the fundamentals of loading and shooting black powder guns and the necessary equipment and accessories to get you started in this exciting sport. It's true, 10% of the bass fishermen catch 90% of the bass. In How to Catch Bass, professional bass fisherman Roger Moore takes you through an extensive crash course in fishing for lunker bass. Learn the secrets of John Wooters, a leading authority on white-tailed deer. He'll show you how to locate productive areas, stalking techniques, how to read buck rubs, horn rattling, bullet placement, and more in How to Hunt the White-tailed Deer. Archery Tactics for Deer presents the experience of America's most widely published bow hunting author, Chuck Adams, as he takes you through the fundamentals of equipment selection, proper clothing, when to hunt, where to hunt, tree stands and ground blinds, ambush strategy, stalking and still hunting, and many other tips for hunting success. Professional trout fisherman Rex Gerlach shows you all the secrets of successful trout fishing in How to Catch Trout. Whether pursuing rainbows in the Rocky Mountain stream or working a brook trout in some secluded northeast stream, Rex Gerlach's secrets will help you become a better fisherman. Bass Tactics That Work takes you fishing with bass champion Larry Nixon. Larry gives you his secrets for success on every aspect of the sport, including lure and bait selection, casting techniques, and tips on where and how to catch bass. How to use soft plastic lures. 4 famed anglers share fishing tips and preferences demonstrating how to use a wide variety of soft plastic lures. These pros share pointers on proper lure selection for walleye, bass, trout, striper, and panfish as they fish the Poudre River and the lakes of the Colorado Rockies. New titles will be continuously added to the Sportsman's Workshop Video Library series. Please ask your dealer about what topics are available.